Good afternoon, everyone. Yeah, I've been working with this, trying to get it to work. Um, Earlier, we had at 9 o'clock, we have our Friday night family Bible study. Trying to get it to work. Um, Earlier, we had what? Friday night family. Okay, I need to adjust this so that it doesn't feedback. So be patient with me, but I'm gonna recap tonight's lesson. Okay, I need to adjust this so that it doesn't feedback. So be patient, but I'm gonna recap tonight's lesson. Okay, I need to. Okay. Okay, let's get started. I'm gonna have to try to ignore the feedback. Well, that. Okay, let's get started. I have to try to ignore the feedback. Well, that. Bad idea. Okay, we were reading well, 2 weeks ago. We stopped on I still have feedback. Okay, we were reading well, 2 weeks ago. We stopped on it was Genesis 42. Where we left off, we had Joseph. Excuse me 1 second. Sweetie, I just realized it's the fan overhead that's making all this noise. Excuse me 1 second. Hold on 1 second. Okay, I'm back on live, guys. I hope I got the issue resolved. Okay, I'm back on live, guys. I hope I got the issue resolved. And there's a lag in between when I'm speaking and what's being recorded over. Let me see if I can fix it. And there's a lag in between when I'm speaking and what's being recorded. As I said, last week we were reading from Genesis chapter 43 and chapter 42. We left off where Joseph finally meets up with his brothers. He gives them some wheat, and he strongly suggests that they bring Benjamin back. Be patient with us while I try and resolve some of the issues we have. Okay, chapter 43 said, just what it is. Okay, that's what it is. I got it. Okay, now it's the dog turn. Okay, we got onking, we got barking, we got fans, we got feedback. The devil is busy, but God is in control. So we're gonna begin in chapter 43. We're gonna take off where Joseph had met up with his brothers, because there was a famine in the land of Egypt, which spread throughout the whole then known world. And we have my husband saying goodnight. The then known world, and it spread out. So Jacob, Joseph's father, who's under the impression that he was dead, killed by wild animals, um, sends the other brothers to Egypt because that's the only land where they know there's wheat and food, to go purchase some wheat, because the famine has touched their land also. So the brothers set out. They meet up with Joseph. Joseph accuses them of being spies. He immediately recognized them, but they don't recognize him for some reason. Whether he wore makeup, whether they just forgot how he looked, the Bible doesn't go into details, but for some reason they don't recognize who Joseph is. But Joseph, because he did recognize them, he accused them of being spies. He's trying to turn the tables so they can learn from the lesson, because they, not only did they betray Joseph, they betrayed his father, they betrayed his mother, because Joseph wasn't allowed to see his father or mother, and his mother died at childbirth, having his second and only brother Benjamin, which he has yet to see because of his situation that they created. So here the brothers begging, asking for wheat in exchange for money. Joseph tells them that, how did they're not Egyptians, why are they there? But they in return tell him, well, we're not coming to beg, we brought our keep, we're gonna give you money in exchange for the wheat. So Joseph gives them the wheat, but he accuses them of being spies, and in order to prove that they're not, he's going to keep their brother, Reuben, and ask them to send for the brother which they mentioned. Um, so when they get back, he'll give them their brother, he'll give them Reuben back, and he'll get to see Benjamin. But it didn't really go as planned, because Joseph filled their sacks up, and he sent them back to Jacob his father. And upon reaching there, Jacob was like, well, he was thankful for the wheat, but because he had lost his favorite son Joseph, not knowing that he's not dead, he has a tight grip on Benjamin and doesn't want Benjamin to fall to the same fate as Joseph, because Benjamin is all what he has left of Rachel, his favorite wife. Joseph was his favorite son from his favorite wife, Rachel. Now, that's a lesson in itself to have favorites, but we'll discuss that at a later date. Now, so here we are, Jacob. What they decide to just use the wheat they have, and hopefully the famine will pass, because Jacob's not seen letting Benjamin go. He has already suffered one heart failure, one heart broke. For the fact that he no longer has Joseph. Well, what amazes me, how Joseph's brothers for years allowed their father, the person who gave them life, to suffer such a fate, knowing that they sold their brother into slavery and that he wasn't killed. But no one tells Jacob any better, even to the point where, well, I don't want to get ahead of myself. So in 43, we take off in chapter 43 at the point where they are. Now the famine was still in the land. And it came to pass, when they had eaten up the corn which they had brought out of Egypt, their father said unto them, Go again and buy us a little food. And Judah spake unto him, saying, The man solemnly protests unto us, saying, Ye shall not see my face, except your brother be with you. Talking concerning Benjamin. Now, their other brother is still with Joseph, but their main concern seems to be Benjamin. If thou wilt send our brother with us, we can go down and buy you some food. But if you will not send him, we will not go down. For the man said unto us, You shall not see my face, except your brother be with you. And Israel said, Wherefore dealt you so ill with me, as to tell the man whether you had a brother? And, in other words, how did he even know you had a brother? Verse 7 says, They said, the man asked us straightly of our state, of our kindred, saying, Is your father yet alive? You have another brother? And we told him according to the tender of these words. Could we certainly know that he would say, Bring your brother down? So, in other words, they respond, Well, how are we to know that he would say, Go and get your brother and bring him back? They had no way of knowing that. And they said, okay, Judah said unto Israel his father, who is Jacob. Remember, Jacob was renamed Israel after he fought with the angel and prevailed. Okay, send a lad with me, and we will arise and go, that we may live and not die, both we and thou and our little ones. So Judah makes it a family affair where the whole family is relying on Jacob letting Benjamin go back with him to get the food, so that his father and the rest of the generations of family could live, that they won't starve to death. 9, I will be a certainty for him. Say, I'll vouch for him. I'll be responsible for him. On my hand thou shalt require him. If I don't bring him back, he said, if I bring him not unto thee and set him before thee, then let me bear the blame forever. That's a scary thing to blame, to ask someone to let you bear the blame forever, because they just might do that. Okay, verse 10 says, For except we linger, surely now we have returned this second time. Okay, so if we hadn't waited, we would be gone and done by now. I see my stepson running across the room and back. That's why I was distracted. I'm back now. Okay, and then Israel said unto them, okay, if it must be so now, do this. Take the best of fruit in the land in your vessel and carry it down to him as a present. A little balm, a little honey, spices, more nuts and almonds. We have to remember that in those days, they did more bargaining than buying with money and gold. I mean, money and gold definitely played a part, but as gifts, they wanted to give the best of what they had to show their appreciation. Okay, and he said, take double the money in your hand, uh, and the money that was brought again in the mouth of your sacks, carry again in your hand, if there, just in case it was an oversight. So when they had left the first time with the honey, with the wheat and corn, um, Joseph had told told his helpers to put their money back in a sack. Now they didn't know it was in a sack because he didn't tell them any better. So they're under the impression that it might have been an oversight, that maybe they think they stole the money back, but they want to bring double, twice as much for what was an oversight on Joseph's part, so they can cover that cost without them being in any trouble and there being any consequences for it. Okay, and then okay, verse 13. Take also your brother, arise and go unto the man. And God Almighty give you mercy before the man, that he may send away the other brother and Benjamin. If I be bereaved of my children, I am bereaved. So if he's saying if a bed befalls him, then I guess he has no other choice but to take that chance because he needs food. So if his kids are kept, then I guess he just has to suffer. And the men took that present, and they took double the money in their hands, and Benjamin, and rose up and went down to Egypt and stood before Joseph. And when Joseph saw Benjamin with them, he said to the ruler of the house, bring these men home and slay and make ready, for these men shall dine with me at noon. When he's saying slay and make ready, he's talking about food, not the brothers, not the men. Okay, so can you imagine seeing your little brother or sister that you are locked away in prison and something happened? A lot of events happen when people are locked away in prison and they don't have the opportunity to witness them or to celebrate them or enjoy or join in them. When Joseph's mother Rachel had Benjamin, she died in childbirth. So Joseph had a lot to grieve. He grieved not seeing his father. He grieved not being able to tell his mom bye. Or even witnessing her grave, or seeing his younger brother born into this world. So can you imagine how many emotions should have ran through his head at that moment, at that time? I bet he was overwhelmed with emotion, bubbling over, bursting to say something. But he didn't. Not yet. Let's see. Okay, verse 16. Okay, in verse 18, it says that the men were afraid because they were brought into Joseph's house, and they said, because of the money that was returned in our sacks at the first time we are brought here, that he may seek an occasion against us and fall on us and take us for bondsmen and our asses. So they think that Joseph is setting them up so they can become slaves like they turned him into. It's amazing that their mindset is still, after all these years, they still have that mindset that And this is what happens when you do people evil, that it haunts you. It haunts you that your time is coming, your time payback is coming. That day that you have to stand up and pay the piper is coming. And they think that this is that day. They think more so is because of the money that's in the sack. But they made occasion reference before that because of what they did to Joseph, that they were sending him back to get Benjamin. He said, all this has happened to us because of what we did to Joseph. But they're not realizing how true it was. I mean, everybody reap what they sow. But it's not Joseph's intention, but it's their mind, their mentality, their thought process is constantly looking out for that day when they have to stand up and pay the piper. That day when something is going to fall back on them. They're not looking at, throughout the story, as we will read, they never look at the positive. They always, when anything happens, they look at the negative. Okay, 18. And they were afraid of the sacks, the money they had left in the sack, and they believed that he was going to overcome them and make them slaves and take their horses. Okay, verse 19 says, and they came near to the steward of the Joseph house, and they talked with him at the door of the house, and said, "O sir, we came indeed down the first time to buy food." They're making reference to the time before they came to Egypt. And it came to pass when we came to the end that we opened our sacks, and behold, every man's money was in the mouth of his sack, our money in full weight, and we brought it again unto our hand. So they're saying, okay, I don't know if it was oversight on our part or oversight on your part, but money was left in a sack. The money that we had brought to buy the wheat the first time, when we checked our sacks, that money was in there. So we bought it all back, because they don't want to be enslaved. They're thinking that something bad is going to happen. So they're trying to prevent that from happening by introducing the fact that they have the money. If it's money that they want, take it. Just spare our lives. Okay, verse 22. And the other money we brought down in our hand to buy food, we cannot tell who put our money in our sack. Okay, we went over that. 23. And he said, peace be to you, fear not, your God and the God of your father have given you treasure in your sacks. I had your money, and he brought Simeon out unto them. So it was Simeon who they kept back as a prisoner, while the brothers went to go get Benjamin and bring back to meet Joseph. But a long time passed, so what his servant tells them that, well, we're the ones put the money in it. It's a blessing from your God. And then on top of that, they bring out the brother which was being held captive. Okay, 24. And the man brought the men unto Joseph's house and gave them water and washed their feet and gave their asses provider. So someone took care of everything for them. And he took them into the house. He gave them water. They washed their feet and took care of their animals, and they made ready. Now, the brothers in return made ready the present. Remember that Jacob told to give them honey, molasses, and all that. So to tell them, so they prepared a present for Joseph, as he came at noon, for they heard that they should eat bread there. So they're getting ready for dinner. Now, we have Joseph, who's overwhelmed by seeing his brother. We have the brothers that are suspecting that something awful is going to happen to them, and they're trying to make every opportunity in their favor to bid their freedom, because they still have the slave mentality, thinking that they're going to get locked up. Okay. Let's see. Let's see. And he asked them of their welfare. He says, "How is your father well? The old man of whom you spoke, is he yet alive?" And they answer, "Thy servant our father is in good health, and he is alive." And they bowed down their heads, and they laid prostrate. Let me see. It says obstinence. So I guess they lay flat on the ground and bowed down to him. Okay, and he lifted up his eyes and he saw his brother Benjamin, his mother's son, and said, "Is this your younger brother, of whom you spake unto me?" And he said, "God be gracious unto thee, my son." Joseph talking to Benjamin. And Joseph made haste. He hurried up and left, for his bowels did yearn upon his brother, and he sought where to weep. And he entered his chamber, and he wept there. He was overcome by emotion. I mean, to see this wonderful creature, his brother, something that he could call his own, from his father and his mother. Because we have to remember, when Rebecca died, Joseph wasn't there. So he didn't have closure. He didn't have an opportunity to say goodbye to his mother. He didn't have an opportunity, nor he had anyone to weep with. He didn't even learn about his mother's death until he seen his brothers coming for food in Egypt. So he's having a moment here of he's just overwhelmed with a lot of emotions because he never had the grieving process. And then he sees his wonderful little brother, who his mother gave his life up in having his brother, bringing him into this world. And he's just overwhelmed. I can't say a certainty that that's why he's overwhelmed. But one can only imagine, with everything that has happened to him, everything he missed out on. I mean, how would you or I feel? Okay, so he weeps. 31, he washes his face, and he went out, he refrained himself, and he sat on bread, so I guess he got ready for dinner. And they sat on him for him by himself. So he made a seating for each of them by themselves. Okay, and for the Egyptians, which did eat with him by themselves. Okay, he separated the Hebrews from the Egyptians because the Egyptians might not eat bread with the Hebrews, for that was an abomination unto the Egyptians. 33, and they set before him the firstborn according to birthright. So the oldest and the youngest according to his youth. The oldest to the youngest. And the men marveled at one another. They probably were trying to figure out how did he know who was the oldest, because we're talking about 11 people. I mean, you could guess one or two, but 11, you have to have some type of history or some type of knowledge. So they're wondering, how did he figure that out? Okay, in 34, and he took and he sent messes unto them from before him. But Benjamin's mess was 5 times so much as any of theirs. And they drank and they were merry with him. In the military, a mess hall has to do with food. So he sent the meals out unto them, and he gave Benjamin 5 times as much. So everyone's happy. They're drinking. It doesn't say liquor. It just says they're drinking and being merry, enjoying themselves. But this version doesn't say it. Okay, and that's the end of chapter 43. Now, chapter 44, I'm going to summarize it. So they're drinking, all of them happy. It's time for in the morning, early in the morning. It's time for them to leave and go back. Joseph fills their sacks up again with as much food as they can carry. And he tells his servant, he said, put his cup, the silver cup. See, I thought it was gold for the longest. In a sack of the youngest, which is his youngest brother Benjamin, and his corn money. And the servant did what Joseph told him. Now, do you smell a setup? Because it's coming. So everybody have sacks, everybody have money, but one of them have the cup. So Joseph just pre-designed this himself because he has a plan. You can, at this point, it seems like he's vindictive and vengeful, that he's getting even with his brothers. But throughout all, Joseph has a plan. Joseph isn't doing these things without a purpose. My mother always told me the best teacher is experience. Joseph went through an awful experience. What he did and turned to them was a teaching experience, a learning lesson. He was trying to show them something. Okay, as soon as the morning was light, the men were sent away, them and their horses. And when they were gone out of the city, and not yet far, Joseph said unto his steward, up and follow after the men, and when thou overtakest them, say unto them, wherefore ye have rewarded evil for good? Is not this it in which the Lord drinketh, wherein indeed he divined it? You have done evil in doing so. Basically, he's just saying, okay, you guys take what I did, you reward me evil for good. That's self-explanatory. And he's talking about the cup. He said, is not this the cup that the Lord drinketh from? I mean, wherein indeed he divined, so it's his personal cup, only for him. I mean, you have done evil in doing so. So we have to remember that none of them have idea that the cup is in any of their sacks. Less known Benjamins. Okay, verse 6, he overtook them and he spake the words that Joseph told him to. And they said, whereas thus say the Lord these were, why is he saying this? God forbid that we should do something like this. You know, behold the money which we found in our sacks, we brought it again to you. And he goes on to, so he brought it again to him. So if they wanted to keep something, in other words, they would have kept the money that was in their sacks instead of offering it back to them. Why would they take a cup when they had money? Okay. And then one of them made the dreadful mistake of saying that if it's found among us, let that person be your servant and your slave. So now that should be a lesson in speaking before you get the results. Because you never know what might be the situation. To make such a declaration can have devastating results, which it could have if Joseph was someone else. And he searched, and he began at the eldest, and he left at the youngest. And the cup was found in Benjamin's sack. And they ripped their clothes and led it every man his ass and returned to the city. Ripping at your clothes is a sign of frustration. It's a symbol of guiltlessness that you don't know what else to do, because people rip their clothes and clothe themselves in sackcloth and they came to God. And sometimes we have to rip our spiritual clothes. We have to how do I say it? Figuratively rip our clothes and to allow God to come in our lives and to handle a situation which we feel we have no control over. In other words, they're saying we've done all we can do. We're ripping our clothes because there's nothing else to do. We're putting it in your hands, God. Well, that's what we as Christians should do more often. We should put everything in God's God. We shouldn't even wait till it gets to the point where we're figuratively ripping our clothes, because we already know that God has all control and God holds everything in his hand. No matter how dire the situation may be or seem, we as Christians, and I'm speaking to myself too, because I'm not walking on air or floating on clouds here, that we have to be more dependent on God instead of working out our situation for ourselves outside of God. Because in most cases, it just leads to one failure after another after another. Okay, so they ripped their clothes. They're back at Joseph's house. And Judah and his brethren came to Joseph's house, for he was yet there. And then they fell before him on the ground. Okay, this is verse 15, chapter 44. And Joseph said unto them, what deed is this that you have done? Will you not such a man as I certainly divine, as a man such as I can certainly divine? So in other words, what Joseph is saying, that, he's such a powerful person. Why would you be so silly enough to steal from such a powerful person? Do you know what he's capable of doing? Yet he knows that they didn't steal it, that he had his servant put it there. But he's just putting, as the term says, the fear of God in them. And Judah said, what shall we say unto my Lord? What shall we speak? Or how shall we clear ourselves? God has found out the iniquity of thy servants. Behold, we are my Lord's servants, both we and he also with whom the cup is found. Okay, so Judah has not only volunteered himself, he's volunteered the whole family. Probably because the alternative is worse, going back to Jacob and telling him that Benjamin is a lifelong slave of Joseph. He'd rather volunteer to stay in Egypt than to go back to where Jacob is, in Canaan. And he says, God forbid that I should do so, But the man in whom the cup is found, Joseph speaking, he shall be my servant. And as for you, get you up in peace unto your father. So Joseph is devising a plan to keep Benjamin. So it seems. Okay. And Judah comes and he begs him and he pleads with him and he recants the whole story of, he recalls the whole story of the first time they went there and what they told him how the father would die if he left, if Benjamin was ever taken away from him, that him too, if something ever happened to Benjamin, that the father would die because of what happened to the first son, Joseph. Now they're talking to Joseph about Joseph. Now, isn't that ironic? Okay, let me see. He's telling the whole story how the father told them to come. The only reason they came out there because they were out of food and they just wanted food, and they came back, and the father didn't want to let Benjamin come back to see him, but they ran out of food and how they had to come back and get food. So I guess he's buying time or trying to soften his heart. So at this point, the brothers are in a dilemma, especially Judah. Judah was the one that promised Jacob that let it be on him, let him be responsible for Benjamin. Now, Joseph, because the silver cup was found in Benjamin's sack, is saying, okay, Benjamin is now my property. You guys can go. I don't need your service. But he stays. So Judah started pleading the case of his father, that his father would die if something ever happens to Benjamin. Next week, the story unfolds, and we see God put Joseph in a position now where he can do a lot of harm to his brothers. Not only he has the upper hand, and next week's lesson is a good lesson to teach us as Christians when we have the upper hand, how will we react towards someone that has wronged us, someone that has betrayed us, someone has lied to us, cheated on us, stole from us. How do we handle these people? How do we handle a situation like that? But what I wanted to tell you before I leave, before I sign off, God is always in control. No matter how dark the situation might look, no matter how dreary the way is, no matter how foggy the sky is, God is in control. Joseph, difference between Joseph and his brothers, they had the same teaching from their father, even though Joseph's instruction, his father taught him Egyptian, but they had the same exposure to Jacob. They had the same exposure to their belief in God. But Joseph's belief in God took him from poverty, from slavery, from being a prisoner to second in charge. Where the brothers' lack of belief, disbelief, took them down a road of fear. Because right now, they're fearing for their lives. When they tell Jacob that his favorite son isn't coming back from his favorite wife who died in childbirth. The thing is that Joseph, God says, if you have the faith of a mustard seed. I love the story of Joseph because Joseph held on to that faith no matter what. I've actually seen a mustard seed. It's like the size of a pin drop. a pinhead, a pin. You know how small, I'm not talking about a big pen, one of those stick pins that you put in a cushion. It's about that size of the head of it. But God said if we had the faith of a mustard seed, we could say unto a mountain, be removed and cast into the sea, and it'll be done. Well, the question is, how do we get this faith? Because it's obvious that the majority, I would even argue that all of us, none of us, possess that faith. All of us lack that type of faith. I mean, so how do we get even the faith of a mustard seed? We have to ask God to give us faith. We have to read his story, read what Jesus did in his life, read how he maintained his faith, how through prayer, through fasting, through reading of God's word. Jesus was constantly in a synagogue, in a Jewish church, reading God's word. He was constantly out doing miracles, praying to God. Jesus didn't do anything that we can't do. We can pray to God and we can ask God to give us the faith that we need to survive a situation. Not only to survive it, but to overcome it, to excel in it, and to share with others to help them through it. That's part of being a Christian. What does it mean to be a Christian if we don't have faith in the one who we claim to follow? I mean, being a Christian isn't a social event. It's not something you just dress up and look pretty with on Sunday, as in my case, Sabbath. It's not a social event that every Sunday we just dress up to go listen to God's word, and we just sit on it and don't do anything just to make us feel good, to assure us that we have a ticket to heaven when Jesus comes back again. We all have a mission. God has called each of us with a purpose and a mission, but it's solely up to us if we take it. Joseph at a young age had visions. I mean, he had dreams and visions where God showed him that what his mission in life was going to be, how he was going to be a ruler, and how even his family was going to come to him, even as a child. And Joseph held on to those dreams. Joseph held on to that vision, because without that vision, Joseph could have easily perished. I mean, Joseph went through one situation after another, after another, after another. The devil was constantly throwing stuff at him, throwing instruments at him. When I say instruments, I mean people. You know, but God and his faith in God sustained Joseph. If you don't get anything out of this lesson tonight, understand that your faith in God will carry you through. And if you're lacking that faith, pray and ask him, because he'll give it to you. He said, ask and you'll receive. Ask God for something that'll be beneficial to you spiritually. So in the end, when his son is seen coming back in the clouds of glory, you can stand up there and say, lo, this is my God. I have waited for him, and he shall save me. And he will. Until next week, remember, we'll be going over chapter 45. Don't miss it, because we'll be discussing the confrontation where Joseph reveals who he is to his brothers. Until that time, pray for me, and I'll be praying for you. Thank you. Good night. God bless.